If you knew Bitcoin would hit $150,000, would you have listened to this guy sooner? This is Raoul Pal, one of the first to call the Bitcoin revolution before most people had even heard the word crypto. And in this interview, he drops the playbook for what's coming next, and how AI could multiply it all.
Along the way, I learned about this thing called Bitcoin. It would have been 2011.
Who from? How?
It was either the Wired article, or Jason Calacanis did some kind of podcast or video about it. And I was like, oh, that's super interesting. And in 2011, I was still of the belief that we weren't kind of past the worst of the credit crisis. And so I was in bunker mode. I was like, all right, like, what should I invest in?
We all were.
We all were. We were like, it can't be that easy to kind of get out of this thing. And so I started digging in, and for 6 months, I just consumed everything I could read. And at the time there wasn't a lot you could read. And I met all the people that I could meet, and there were not a lot of people to meet. And eventually it would have been in early 2012, I said, you know what? I think that this has the potential to be world changing. And I remembered thinking at the time, if I didn't have the cojones to actually do something, I would regret it the rest of my life. And so I started buying $1,000, $5,000 over Mount Gox, and lo and behold, I bought a couple $100,000 of Bitcoin.
At what price?
Between $7 and $8, and the price, I think it went to 30, and I was like, I'm a genius. And then it fell to like 5, and I was like, all right, well, that was a waste of money. And then over the next 6 or 12 months, the price started going, I think, into like the 50s, 60s, 70s. And I was like, I'm definitely an investing genius.
Pause. Think about this. What if buying Bitcoin at $5 wasn't even the smartest play? What if the real alpha was investing in the companies building the future of crypto before the world even knew their names? Coinbase, Ripple, Chainalysis. Raoul didn't just ride the wave, he built the surfboard.
But I don't know if this is going to last. And so I started looking for companies that were building kind of the first generation of infrastructure to make Bitcoin useful and accessible. And so along the way, I met Brian Armstrong, and so invested early in Coinbase, and I invested early in Chainalysis, and invested in Ripple, and a bunch of kind of the first generation of companies that were built around that time. And it's actually really funny. I was actually using Bitcoin to make a bunch of those investments. And you would think, hey, if you invested in Coinbase and seed, you would have done really well. Had I just held on to the Bitcoin, I actually would have done better than making those.
I spoke to Wences about this, and because he was one of the OGs, and I think he stuck $2 million in at $3, and he's like, I had to reassess everything I was doing because every investment I ever made was worse than my Bitcoin.
I had a conversation with my board. Chamath Palihapitiya was on my board, and I said, hey board, I was like, I think we should do something really big in Bitcoin. And we had built this business, the second market, where we had like tens of thousands of sophisticated investors that were looking to us to buy off the run kind of interesting stuff. And so they said, okay, like green light, go figure out what to do. And I said, look, it's really hard to buy Bitcoin. And I knew a lot about the history of gold and gold investing, and I knew that the gold ETF was really kind of the catalyst that made gold, kind of an available and accessible and legitimate asset class. So I said, I'm going to build a Bitcoin version of the Spider Gold ETF. And so we did a bunch of work, and I think we reached out to the SEC and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this Bitcoin ETF. And they were like, Bitcoin? Bit what? And so we very quickly realized that there was no way that the SEC was going to allow for a Bitcoin ETF in 2013. So we did something that I think was super pioneering. We launched it as a private vehicle. And then we took it public basically on the OTC QX market, which is kind of, you have the NYSE and NASDAQ, and then you have the next tier down is the OTC QX market. So we launched what ultimately became the Grayscale Bitcoin trust. So we're doing this while I'm running Second Market. And because we were buying so much Bitcoin, we set up a Bitcoin trading desk, and we started buying Bitcoin ourselves. And we started investing off our balance sheet. And I said to the board, I want to go all on Bitcoin. I was like, why don't we spin out Second Market and then we just go all in on Bitcoin? And the board said, all right, we have your support. And then NASDAQ called and said, we want to buy Second Market. So I sold Second Market to NASDAQ and then went all in, just roll the dice and we're going to go all in on Bitcoin. And then that was the Bitcoin product became Grayscale, the Bitcoin trading business.
Which year was this?
It would have been 2014 or so.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that became Grayscale, and then the trading business became Genesis, and then we had the investing portfolio, and I kind of basically dumped all of my angel investments, all my crypto into what became DCG.
Hold up. Let's pause for a second. What you're hearing isn't just impressive history. It's a masterclass in how billion-dollar crypto ecosystems actually get built. Because while most people were still arguing if Bitcoin was real, Raoul and his circle were laying the foundation for what you are using today. Grayscale, Genesis, Coinbase, DCG. This was the spark that lit the fuse. Think about this. Would you rather buy Bitcoin at $7 or build the companies everyone uses to buy Bitcoin? Now imagine you're early, again, because with AI and crypto colliding, that moment might be right now.
Amazing. And then so DCG then grows to be an enormous beast because it was the access point for almost everybody, right?
Yeah, I think we're uniquely positioned to serve as kind of a bridge between this asset class and the kind of the traditional investing market. Because at the time, I mean, it was, I remember when you put out, your $1 million Bitcoin price prediction, people were like, this guy's gone crazy. There were very, very few. I mean, you were really one of the first ones.
That was 2013.
Yeah. And so there were very few people that were legitimate Wall Street finance people.
I don't know if I'm legitimate, but I'll take it.
Well, you were right. And so now you're legitimate. And so, because I had developed a bit of, some credibility, kind of doing what I do at Second Market, when I started running around doing kind of the Bitcoin evangelism, people listened. The Tensor is building the World Wide Web of intelligence. And so the way that Tensor works is anybody can launch what's called a subnet on top of Tensor. And these are specific problems that are trying to be solved by harnessing the global intelligence. And so it could be compute, it could be inference, it could be data, it could be training, pre-training. It could be there's subnets that have been launched to predict the price of Bitcoin, to predict sports scores. And so in the way that 30 years ago with the internet, when the browser was launched, and it created this Cambrian explosion of websites. Before that, you would access the internet via Prodigy and America Online, kind of akin to today's OpenAI and Claude. The Tensor is ushering in this whole new era of openness and permissionless innovation. And it's exploding right now.
And so who are the kind of people who are on these subnets and on the network itself? Are there people who are providing data and they're monetizing that, monetizing their compute? How do people hear about it, and what is it attracting as an ecosystem?
Well, so you had asked the question, kind of what got me excited about it. And a number of things got me excited about it. One is it's such a refreshing change to be surrounded by people who are mission-driven, ambitious, who are trying to solve the world's problems. And crypto is a mechanism to do it, but it's not all about crypto. It's not about it's not just about number go up. It's about, okay, how do we address these problems that can only be solved for by incentivizing the world to help you kind of solve these problems? And so when I met the founders, the writers of this white paper, I, like everybody, was inspired by them. That's number one. Two is, the Tensor was launched. It was a fair launch. It's just like Bitcoin. It was a white paper that was then turned into code that then launched. So there was no VC round. There were no allocations to foundations or team members. So everybody that is in Tensor right now got there by being genuinely interested in the technology and buying or earning Tau, the token. So you have this organic community that is formed, that is mission driven, that is ambitious, that has kind of earned their way into having a seat at the table. And by the way, it has the same token economics as Bitcoin. So it's got 21 million cap. It's got the same halving concept as Bitcoin. So it's very, very easy to understand. And what has happened over the past few months has been called an upgrade of Tensor, where the subnets that we just talked about, each one of those subnets actually now have a token. And so people can now
like sort of like layer twos.
It is, but it's not in a very important way. The distinction is every single subnet token is traded in and out of Tau. So your functional currency, your denominator currency for all these subnet tokens is Tau. So as people are trying to speculate as to which of the subnets they think are generating the most valuable intelligence, when they buy the subnet token, they're essentially indirectly buying Tau, because it's traded out of liquidity pools. So there's 88 subnets right now, and the one's launching every 2 days. So you have this community of builders, 88 different teams for the most part, who are trying to solve a problem, but they're all like joined arm in arm, because at the end of the day, if they can drive utility of Tensor and Tau, if they can attract capital into their subnet token, it just flows into Tau. So it's two subnets may be doing the exact same thing, and one of them may just kick ass. If that subnet can bring in hundreds of millions of dollars into the Tensor ecosystem and that subnet token skyrockets in value, that other subnet, their token in US dollar terms is going to go up as well because of the success of those subnets. And so it's a very collaborative community. And I'm unaware of any other project in crypto that has the same dynamic. Because if you think about like any tokens that launch on Ethereum or Solana, essentially no value accrues to Ethereum and Solana. I mean, you have transaction fees, but ultimately those teams are all about, okay, I want to create value for my own token. They don't really care ultimately whether or not Ethereum or Solana is successful.
No, it's closer to NFTs, which are priced in ETH.
Right.
Let's say
that would be the closest analog. Exactly.
And it's early stage. What kind of people are in the ecosystem? Is it all kind of wide-eyed, super smart crazies where things normally start with? These people are like, oh, wow, I've discovered this new... Who's in it? And what are they... I know it's relatively broad and deep, but give me an idea of how big this ecosystem is and what kind of people are involved.
For Bitcoin OGs, we are circa 2012, 2013 right now.
Yeah.
And look, if the price is any indication of kind of where it is, the price of Tau is like $200 right now.
Yeah.
So if you kind of look at like in the history of Bitcoin,
what's the market cap?
It's 1.5 billion or so.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And so you have, in the same way that the early pioneers in Bitcoin were more kind of libertarian leaning, which some people would call me and them crazy, but that was a philosophy. In Tensor, it's really more AI crazies.
Yeah.
And
so I met, and they're very technical people, and they're all different backgrounds.
All different backgrounds, but legitimate backgrounds. Like legit, and so that's inspiring. So you spend time with individuals that are building the subnets, and then what's happened really over the past couple months is there's a real explosion of the infrastructure that's being built.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because what you're hearing now is the exact same tone early Bitcoiners had in 2012, except this time it's about AI. This Tensor project isn't some hype coin. It's a permissionless network designed to reward real intelligence. Imagine owning Bitcoin when websites were still weird little blogs. That's where this is now. You've made it this far, so here's your edge. Listen closely to how Raoul frames this final segment, because it might just be your second chance at spotting the next paradigm shift before everyone else.
To make either the intelligence that's getting spit out of these subnets accessible or monetizable. There's an explosion in the applications that are being built for people to discover subnets and to invest in subnets, to track subnets. And as we're kind of going through this market correction right now, there's this small community of people. We're all just kind of heads down doing our thing at Tensor, and things are growing really fast, and people are, generally speaking, not being distracted by what's happening with crypto and the macro stuff.
Because it's almost too early to matter right now. First, you got to build shit.
We all want to move faster. We want to do more. We want to, before the world discovers this, we're all trying to properly position the businesses that we're building, the investing that we're doing, before the world wakes up to this amazing thing that's being built.
So how I guess you're thinking about it right now is like early stage build of EVM, where it's all developers, it's the building out of use cases, what's happening, as opposed to token activity, retail investment, total value transacted. It's too early for that, right?
It's too early, and the infrastructure isn't even there yet. Like right now, if you want to buy subnet tokens, you need to own Tau, and there's half a dozen sites you can go to.